What's up, guys, and welcome to LPL First Look. This is going to be a short podcast that we have focusing on LPL Spring 2022, all the interesting changes that happened, and at the end, we are going to be doing a brief tier list of the top 8 teams. Today with me, I have Peter Dun and Kelsey Moser, who we'll throw on the screen here, and we'll just briefly introduce them and just see how we're doing. So, Kelsey, this is last minute. I know we're recording at midnight, but how are you doing? I know you're always ready to talk LPL.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that I can riff in if you want to talk about EDG's founding in 2014. I've recited that so many times, off the cuff at this point. So
perfect. And Peter Dun, obviously head coach of EG. I mean, we have 2 EG coaches here, but yeah, Peter Dun, head coach of EG. Done a lot of stuff before. I know that you also are an LPL enthusiast, so thought this was a perfect time to get you involved. Are you ready for the season to start?
Yep, always a pleasure, Dom. Can't wait for the LPL to get started. It's just over a week now.
So we're going to just jump right into it. The biggest news that we had of the offseason for most people is that UZI is now back playing for BLG, but he is in a sub position. And I think the main thing that I want to talk about with you guys as people that have tracked UZI's career is, where do you think UZI is actually going to start playing, and how much do you think UZI will actually play when he starts coming into the lineup, if at all? Because, I mean, I think we can all agree that he's probably not going to be playing in the first 2 weeks. He never really plays until after Chinese New Year anyway. So now the question is, will UZI actually be a main part of this team? Doggo, obviously a really proficient AD carry coming over from Taiwan. So where do you guys think that UZI is going to play into this lineup? We can start with Kelsey, and then we'll go to Peter afterwards.
I would say that there's a trajectory of ADC development that you see that's almost stereotypical at this point, and UZI is kind of UZI is kind of the founder of this progression. Basically, you start out inting your ass off, and then you get to a point where you can outplay a lot more situations, navigate those situations very proficiently. I would say that Doggo is somewhere kind of like on the halfway mark of that trajectory, and we could see if he gets to the final form, which is UZI, and no one's really ever replicated that except for UZI himself. So from my perspective, this is definitely going to be an UZI waiting room team, as pretty much every team is, until you get to a point where, UZI starts towards the end of the season and manages to make a deep run in playoffs. And when he was on RNG, very typically, they were always around hovering at the cusp of playoffs until UZI joined the roster. And I kind of expect something similar with BLG, because I feel like this roster is designed to play towards bottom lane.
Yeah, but I just agree with Kelsey on this. You don't sign a player of the caliber of UZI and the pedigree of UZI without planning to start him. I think that obviously he never plays before Chinese New Year anyway. But we'll see how much they ease him in. He's looked pretty healthy on stream, actually. When I've seen him on stream, he looks healthier, he looks fitter. And he looks in good shape. So I think we'll definitely be seeing him by the end of the season. When we go and talk about his new team, BLG, we'll talk about whether it's the right team for him. But definitely, as unfair as it is to an AD carry of the caliber of Doggo, he will definitely start, and we'll see if he wins that fight by the end of the end.
So are you saying you think? Oh, sorry, I was just gonna ask. Do you think UZI will start right away? Because you came in and you're like, I disagree, and now I'm going to restate what you said.
No, I agree. No, I said I agree. Sorry.
It's all good. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess my question would be now, what do you think Uzi's level is going to be when he comes back? Are we going to see that instant godlike level? Because from my experience, so I watched him on the Super server, and I've seen some of his streams recently, and it seems like his form is still top tier. His overall mechanics just still look more crisp than anything I've ever seen from an AD carry. So you guys think that there's going to be a time where he's, kind of getting used to pro play again, and he's not playing as proficiently as he was before? Or do you think he's going to come in at that level where he is just one of the absolute best AD carries in the world?
I think we can expect him to come back very close to top form. From his streams, he's looked exceptional. The style of play that he wants to play, where he trades CS for harass in the early game, you have to be really on your game in order to play that for the entire laning phase. And he's looked really, really strong coming in. It's almost like we're seeing a vintage vintage Uzi. The question though is, when he comes in, you can guarantee that teams are going to be coming bot with mid jungle. Thankfully, the TP changes means that they won't be top laners as well, so it will just be mid jungle coming bot. And the question is whether Fofo and Weiwei will be able to give him the support he needs, because his style of play requires that your jungle plays towards bot, and we'll have to see if his team are allowed to do
Kelsey, what do you think about his overall level?
Yeah, I think just to add to that point, you asked that question. It's like, okay, someone took time off. How good are they going to be? When you think about UZI, the context that you have to come from is you talk to coaches that played against and players that played against UZI and Ming at Worlds or at any kind of international event or just casually in scrims on the side during the season. They always learn something new about how bot matchups should be played. They always say that, okay, what are we going to learn today? Was the way that people came away from RNG scrims. So he was just always that much further ahead. So even if he's not perfectly informed, he will still be the best AD carry of the league. Like that's just the way it is.
Better than Viper? Viper will have no chance, or do you think it'll be kind of close?
I think that could be like a close argument, right? Because sometimes I watch Viper, it's just like, I can't believe that he thought of that, Like I can't believe that he not only saw that play, realized that it was possible and then executed it in the moment. And there are very few players that kind of make you feel that way. And like with UZI, I feel like sometimes he doesn't even visualize it. He just kind of outplays it and reacts in a lot of ways. Whereas like Viper, for me, it's like he's thinking about the situation before it happens in a lot of the ways that he plays. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's one of those close arguments. But historically, obviously, UZI was king after like 2015. Yeah.
Definitely.
Obviously, Viper has Mako as well, which could maybe adjust the 2v2 bot lane. But for sure, I think we're going to see those two being a decent gap between those two and the rest of the competition, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you guys there. I think that this guy is just an absolute beast. I think everyone who is an UZI fan is going to be really happy with the level that he'll show whenever he comes back into the starting lineup for BLG. Next team I want to talk about is FPX, and this will lead into the LNG topic because FPX essentially completely disbanded their team. I mean, obviously after Worlds, it was such a disappointing showing that you knew changes were going to be happening. I don't think a lot of people expected it to be that many changes. And yeah, they ended up going with 4 new players. The only player that are still playing for the team is LWX. Obviously, they have Zhao Lahu, who used to be a sub on the team. He played a little bit during summer. And yeah, now Clid and Gory coming into this team as well. So I think a lot of people were really surprised. They thought that this team was going to really fall off when they announced that they were actually going to be dropping 4 members. But I feel like the lineup that they put together is actually not a bad one. I think this lineup can actually do pretty well myself. Peter, where do you stand on the FPX roster? Like, do you think that this will be a team that could potentially compete for like a top 4 spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a team that could compete for Worlds. I think that they were in the finals of the Demacia Cup. They may be, if they were maybe a Viego ban away from winning Demacia Cup, but it is what it is. But I think that they put together a very interesting roster. I think, though, that the top 5, when we talk about maybe our tier list later, the top 5 are a little bit ahead, but I think they form an interesting bridge between the top 5 and everyone else. But definitely, this is not a roster to be underestimated, and definitely Xiao Lahu could be one of the breakout players for people who don't really follow LPL in depth. This is a player to really watch out for this season.
Kelsey?
Definitely by far the player I'm most excited for is Xiao Lahu. I think I was kind of underwhelmed by Gory's showing in Demacia Cup, and it's possible, he was still getting acquainted with the environment, and we'll still see like a breakout performance from him. But for me, it's like this is a Xiao Lahu or bust kind of team, and LWX still will have those pop-up moments, but they're not reliable to the level where you're going to make or push for Worlds. So I see this team as like almost Worlds, but not quite, more or less.
And today it was actually announced that Clid is officially going to be joining the roster. I know he was rumored for a while, but now it is official that Clid is going to be joining, and he wasn't playing in Demacia Cup. So I guess my question would be, like, what version of Clid do you think we are going to see with this team? Because, I mean, we've saw the Clid from JDG way back. Then we saw, like, SKT Clid, where, I mean, in 2019, I know TN fans are going to probably hate me for this. I think Clid was probably the best jungler in the world in 2019. He looked really, really good at that tournament. So I kind of want to see where you guys are at on Clid, because the last couple years have obviously not been what we expect from him. He's obviously became more reserved in his playstyle in general, and now he's back in China. So is he going to be unleashed? Are we going to see the old mechanical god Lee Sin Gragas player, or are we going to see this really consistent, like slow, methodical jungler that we saw in the last couple years?
I definitely hope we're going to see him unleashed. But let's go and see how things go and develop in the season. But you know, he has a lot of doubters to prove wrong. And I agree with you. He was definitely at his peak back in 2019. And we'll just have to see when the season starts. But I'm definitely a player to watch out for in FPX. I think, like I said before, FPX are definitely a team we should be tracking over the course of this year.
Surprised that you guys are thinking of Clid when people were talking about Tarzan then. I thought I was a hipster for saying Canyon, and then we've got some Clid enjoyers from 2019. But I think, yeah, Clid for me, I don't expect a whole lot. I think he'll look really, really good on some of his signature picks, Lee Sin. I think he's definitely an upgrade over Beichuan. I think Beichuan can definitely prove people wrong and not just be like the Karthus guy. He definitely looked better than he had looked historically, so maybe he'll get some time. It's a long LPL season. Players get tired, and it's like, throw the sub in there. But yeah, I think I don't really expect Clid to be the factor that tips them into world contention.
All right, yeah, we'll have to definitely see how they look in the first couple weeks of the season with this new lineup. So that moves us into the next topic, which is LNG. Obviously, FPX was pretty much DoNB's team for the longest time. Now DoNB moves to LNG with Lumao from JDG. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were expecting LNG to look a lot better in Demacia Cup. I think a lot of people expected them to probably win that tournament, considering they had pretty much their whole main roster, where a lot of teams didn't play with full rosters, like EDG, RNG was missing Ming, etc. So the question is, how much should we panic based off Demacia Cup? Like, we saw a showing where some things did actually look like they were just big points and big issues for LNG. But I'm not actually sure if that should be, the end all be all of, LNG is actually just not going to be as good as we think. So where do you guys come down on LNG and DoNB joining the team? And then I guess the secondary part is the Lumao part. Do we think that we'll actually be seeing Lumao, because he kind of ran it down for the entire Demacia Cup? You can start with this one, Kelsey.
Yeah, I was very confused by the Lumao pickup in general, because I thought IWD was a top 4 support in the LPL in last year. It's like, oh, okay, LPL is just setting their top 4 supports. This is cool. But then they picked up Lumao, who definitely, there was that quote from him in 2020 that was, "Oh, I'm bored. I'm just going to engage." That's kind of how I feel like Lumao plays in general. Whereas IWD is a lot of his plays are definitely like pre-planned based on waves and stuff like that, just based on watching him on the map and things like this. So I'm kind of expecting IWD to come back, unless there's something that we don't know about going on in the team, where it's like they just can't function as a unit anymore. Like Light and IWD have played together for too long, and they just can't anymore. So I am expecting to see IWD back rationally, but I think Lumao has a certain amount of brand and panache from his time on JDG that can't be denied. So I think he'll be in at the start, at least, of the season.
I mean, it's very well known that DoNB and Lumao are very close friends. I mean, maybe part of DoNB signing for this team is that he could bring Lumao along for the ride. I mean, I felt that LNG last year were very much an I1D Tarzan team. I think that this is a team which functioned. They probably had maybe the best or second best support jungle pairing in the league, after RNG maybe, and we'll have to see how this compromise can come about, right? Because I think I'm a big I1D fan. I thought that he was one of the best supports in the league last year. His roaming was what activated that team, and when he was on range supports at Worlds and he couldn't roam and make things happen with his engaged supports at Worlds, LNG kind of looked a bit lost. So I think their mid-jungle top is going to be crazy good. I hope they don't sack I1D. I will say also that they brought in Poppy from RNG, who was I think he was the assistant coach Tabe's assistant coach, but because of Tabe's visa issues, he was on stage, I think, at both Worlds and MSI. And obviously, this is a coach that's worked with RNG a lot, and he should be a very good jungle support coach. And we're going to have to go and see how that plays out, because this team has the potential to contest for a title, and they should be looking for a title, but it's all going to come down to how their jungle and support matches up against the others.
I like that you mentioned the jungle support synergy, but the confusing thing for me is that if IWD's big strength is his ability to pair with his jungler and make things happen around the map, what would be the function of actually having Lu Mao in the team? Because when I think of Lu Mao at his peak in 2020, it was like him and Kanavi taking over the game, him roaming early, like getting deep vision down, and pretty much just functioning as, like that secondary jungler on the map, just having that constant roaming pressure. So are they essentially just having two supports that do the same exact thing, and they're just picking between like whichever one is playing better at the moment? Or is there something that I'm missing from like Lu Mao's skill set that could be vital to the team? Like, one thing I was thinking about that could be an answer to this would be his perceived shot calling. I know on JDG he was considered to be a pretty good shot caller at a point. Obviously it didn't work out last year, but is this like the main reason that they're trying to bring in Lu Mao? Is he just going to be a godlike shot caller? And if he is, how is that going to work with Doinb?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. The other question is, how does this work with Tarzan? How does it work with Doinb? We have a lot of, like, if Lu Mao is a big shot caller, then we have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. I mean, to me, it looks like they've just picked up, on current form, a worse version of I1D, but maybe that inbuilt synergy exists. So let's.
It's also really interesting because I have heard that like some of Lu Mao's leadership and shot calling was one of those like external overblown. Like I always remember when Marin was hyped as a shot caller just because he talked. It's like, and he was basically saying "come top," and that was the extent of his shot calling, but he wasn't actually a shot caller. So like stuff like that, I think definitely comes out or affects the perception of players, and I've heard there's a little bit of that with Lu Mao going on. But I also think there is a lot to be said for support mid synergy, especially on a team where Doinb is playing Doinb. So if like Lu Mao will just ditch the wave and go mid, right? And I feel like IWD will not do that. IWD actually is an enchanter player. Like originally he was the Janna one trick he's the best Janna in China. That's like his main thing. So that would be like a much more bot-centric identity, I think, when IWD is playing, even though he is a very good roamer. And then meanwhile, it's like you can play the standard Doinb style of, okay, we're just going mid. That's how it is. We're opening up mid lane, and then we're going wherever we want on the rest of the map, unless people counter us by going mid first. So that's kind of how I see that main difference playing out.
Yeah, I guess when we go to the tier list, we can go further into depth as to how good we actually think LNG will be this year. Okay, next up we have TES, which added Zoom and Tien, and Zhao Peng. We can't forget about Zhao Peng when Kelsey's here, because that's her favorite player of all time, for sure. So TES, they obviously won Demacia Cup, 3 Viego games in a row for Tien. Tien also, carried over a little bit of that Worlds form on Jarvan. But this team, I think, has definitely upgraded where they were. I mean, as far as top lane goes, I perceive Zoom to just be what they were looking for in Qingtian. I think he's just kind of a more stable version of what Qingtian brings to the team. So, I just want to know from you guys where you see this team headed, and like, how do you guys think that this team is going to function? Is it Tien make or break, or do you believe that this team actually has like the potential to really top the LPL?
Well, go ahead.
I think I have a lot to say about this team in general. I think that the Zoom pickup is very awkward to me, just because I think Zoom, he's the kind of player who, that he secretly takes pride in being like an insane weak side god, right? Like he has the ego where he's just really, really, I can manipulate the wave perfectly. It crashes when I say it crashes, that kind of guy. And he'll never call his jungler, like almost as a point of pride, like you could see, because that should have been the only way that JDG could win games. And sometimes they would do it, but then when it would get to high pressure situations, he would just default back to like manipulating his wave and his bot lane's inting and nothing's happening, right? I see this TES kind of playing out like that, where Zoom is like Zoom was playing great. They were setting up these insane top dives in the Demacia Cup, right? And they were taking over games like that. But I expect in LPL for them to sort of default more towards that kind of crutch play almost, or that level of, okay, he's going to not say anything in playoffs and he's going to play GP and farm up and scale. The way I think you mentioned at one point on Twitter that Tien was the most concerning part for you. I think Xiaopeng is kind of like, if you guys know about the Brony fandom, it started out as like an ironic thing with people on like guys saying, "Oh, I love this My Little Pony show," and then eventually they actually became fans. It's kind of my relationship with Xiaopeng. Yeah, more or less. So
perfect.
And but he is the kind of guy who will like flash past the Raptor camp level 1 and just like throw an axe at you as Olaf and chase you down. Like that's the kind of guy, and most of the time that just goes terribly wrong, but he'll do it anyway. Like I have to admire that kind of confidence where it's you get back up on that course and you try the big play again over and over, even if your rate of success is like less than 50%. So I think it's something that can create initiative on this team and can create like spice or excitement. And it's definitely something that will allow Tien to kind of rest when his wrist hurts and not hurt them as much and sort of force them to push the envelope in certain points, especially since I think Draw is also one of those playmakers who will just go in. Even if something like moves funny, he'll go in. So like having someone who will do that with him, I think is also helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that looks like it's found a lot of consistency in its solo lanes and carry positions. You know, you have Jackie Love, you have Knight, you have Zoom, and they've decided that they want to have the most variance possible that they can possibly put in a team at jungle and support. I mean, you know, you have Chen, who's been really consistent last year, and then you put Xiaopeng as your stabilizing backup jungler. I think, though, that I mean, I know I'll talk a little about coaches over the show. I know that not every player in LPL believes in coaching, but what I would say is that they have Crescent, who maybe long-term LPL watchers would know as BSYY, who's back, the LGD coach, back in the day when LGD were amongst top teams in the league. But he was coaching the team in 2020, the year that they went to Worlds. But in 2021, he moved to more head coaching role, and they brought in Warhorse as their kind of strategic coach, Warhorse of Flash Wolves and various other teams. And the big difference here, we're going to see a big difference on the coaching side, right? Because Crescent is obviously a coach who is much more flexible with his players. He's much more a bit what we call a mediator style of coaching, maybe in the West. Whereas you had Warhorse, who's very, very strictly regimented in how he wants the game played. You know, he wants the game played mid-jungle, transferring to side, preferably to bot lane. And I think maybe this, when you have such creative players as Knight and Jackie Love, you know, I think maybe this will unlock them a little bit more compared to last year, and it will be interesting to see, because this kind of regimented approach that Warhorse brought to the team was kind of solved by the end of the year, and I think that's why we saw top begin to fall off a little bit coming into playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that change affects the team.
I mean, okay. I'll yeah.
Go for it.
I'm just going to say, like, of all the teams to bring up coaches on, TES is not, that's just not the one that you bring up coaches on. They're still going off of, like, what I call the XX style, which is XX basically just said, okay, everyone reset, go mid. XX is basically, like, the NA homie, right? Like, and that's basically, you watch TES play, they still play like that. So I've heard that this is, like, one of the most player-driven teams in LPL, so I think it's BSYY from that perspective probably works better for them because he'll let the players play like how they want. But yeah, it's funny that that's the team you bring up coaches on here.
Well, I mean, I just think that when you look at this team, I think they're just relying on Jackie Love actually being back in form. I mean, if Jackie Love gets into like 2020 summer split form, I feel like this team will actually be really good because they have like the perfect idea of like strong bot lane, strong mid lane, and a top lane that can play weak side. So they can just literally play through amazing laners if people are actually able to get to that level. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for with this team. And I think that that's really what they're going for here, is trying to just have some of the best laners in LPL and just having people that complement each other well. So, I mean, we'll have to see if they're able to do it. I know Jackie Love has been inting. And I actually wanted to bring this up because when you were talking about UZI being the person that people kind of progress towards, where you like go in all the time and then you eventually like figure out where you can actually like pick your spots, and then you eventually like develop into that god tier AD carry. I want to know how JackeyLove has fit into this archetype, because I feel like he's kind of went in reverse. Like he like started off almost as like the god tier AD carry, and then it seems like he becomes more and more like crazy with his with his times to like engage or times to jump into a fight as time goes on. So like how does JackeyLove fit into that stereotypical like Chinese AD carrier stereotype that we talked about?
And I kind of want to hear from you how likely you think JackeyLove is to be in that form, because that's the biggest question mark for me. But I think to answer your question, I would say that JackeyLove is the Draven Kog'Maw player. And you might think it's weird that I group those champions together, but they both just like go forward until they die. And that's kind of like, he's always sort of walked forward into things. And I feel like that's just the way that he plays, right? And it definitely worked out for him, I think, especially in Kai'Sa meta, because you basically play Kai'Sa like an assassin, you all in and you kill someone, right? And that's kind of what works for you. And I just see him, he still wants to just go forward. Like he'll always E4, he'll always go forward. And I feel like he's kind of stuck in that time forever. And when it favors him, he does really, really well. When he has Peel around him, when he has his team like kind of playing. I love the way Knight plays with JackeyLove, because Knight will always be the guy who like gets caught in side lane, and then the rest of the team collapses, which creates so much space for JackeyLove to just free hit, right? So like that's kind of the player that I see JackeyLove as. And right now it looks like he's inting because it's not working out for them.
But he was sick during Demacia Cup. That's what they came out with. So that must be the reason. Well, I mean, one thing that I wanted to say is that I feel like Zoom is actually really good at playing with that type of style. I feel like Zoom actually understands really well how to play like on a tether with his AD carry, and when his AD carry just wants to hit and he needs to walk in and tank. So that's like part of the reason why I actually see like some hope for this team, is because that's a characteristic that I think matches really well with how Jackie wants to play. Peter, you wanted to say something?
No, I just say that I agree with everything that you two have said. I think the TP changes benefit this team more than any other team in the entire league. And I mentioned the TP changes when we were talking about BLG, about UZI's new team, but yeah, JackeyLove just wants to go forward. He's one of the easiest people on earth to TP flank behind after you bounce a wave, and that was a play that affected top quite a few times last year, and now he's going to be able to do it in isolation. So yeah, let's see how it goes. And I think that these guys definitely have really strong mechanical players, and yeah, it will be exciting to see them when the season starts.
Okay, so last topic, last team that we're going to talk about before we go into the teams individually, or we can hit more on some of the teams that we have in our top 8, is RNG. I wanted to talk about their role swap of Xiaohu, who was one of the best top laners of LPL for the entirety of 2021. It was his first year playing top lane. He's role swapping back to mid, Cryan kicked from the team, and Bin now added to top lane. So I think that this is kind of interesting that they decided to go for the Xiaohu role swap back to mid, and instead of just picking up a mid laner that they thought fit their team. But yeah, I wanted to get your guys' opinions on this role swap and the addition of Bin. I mean, I think we can all agree that Bin is good, but how do you see Xiaohu's transition to mid going? Like, do you think this will be smooth?
Yeah, I mean, I think Xiaohu was the best top laner in the world at most points last year, and I think that Bin was the only one kind of in the league that contested him. I don't think he has to play that well. Remember that this RNG team is a team that won MSI and got to the quarterfinals of Worlds, but many people in EGG said that basically they were the second best team at the tournament. They just happened to draw EDG early on, and this was basically based on this was with Cryan in mid lane, right? So the question you need to ask is how well does Xiaohu have to play in order to match up to Cryan's level of play last year? And I mean, he's not an Annie player, but I think we're gonna see a little bit more from him. I think that he was a very competent mid laner for most of his time in LPL, and I think that RNG are still going to be defined by their mid jungle. But if you were going to replace Xiaohu with anybody, Bin is a good person, and I think Xiaohu is not going to suffer against some of the I don't know how much he's going to dominate mid lane, but he's definitely going to be able to hold a lot of the top mid laners in the league.
Kelsey, thoughts?
So I actually have a slightly different opinion on this, because I think what allowed RNG to function so well is because they could time certain plays like so successfully, right? It was literally like Xiaohu will use the range versus melee matchup to slow down the wave crash, and then everyone knows exactly when they need to be top for this play to happen, right? Whereas if you watch Bin play, this guy just wants to trade with you. He doesn't care what it does to the wave. This is why like Suning now Weibo did so well with just split mapping strategies, right? In 2020, right? They basically just, because Bin just throws the wave like however he wants. And it also, like, if he died, they could just have SFM invade bot and get a huge advantage by taking an entire quadrant, right? Because jungle XP was like so huge. Whereas it's hard to kind of time plays around how Bin plays. You're basically just going to go top and fight. And that kind of has to be the strategy. That feels like you're going to get like the Xiaohu identity, where he's going to leave mid a lot and he'll be like multiple levels down. And if Bin doesn't carry the game, it's going to be kind of like the RNG situation. But Bin is not to top lane what UZI was to bot lane, right? So that's where I have a harder time seeing RNG work as much as a well-oiled machine as they did before. I think they still have the best jungle support duo in the league. They'll still be really good. But I actually kind of feel like I'm less confident about RNG with this change than I was at Worlds. So
one thing I don't think Cryan got enough credit for was his like the fact that he actually played around these timings and was willing to just ditch the wave at a moment's notice whenever they were making these top plays. So I guess the follow-up here would be, does RNG lose a little bit of their identity now that they're going to have been playing top? Because it feels like their whole identity before was the Xiaohu just dominating top matchups and just like 3-man diving the person on cooldown and getting that advantage with like a roaming mid laner. Now if Bin is playing to kind of just trade and do his own thing and playing pretty much like he doesn't have teammates, does RNG like still have an identity? Are they just going to be a standardized team where they just try to play lanes really well and just like play by the book? Or do you think we still will see like some glimpses of the RNG that has like this heavy like roaming style?
I mean, Xiaohu was able to play that style in the UZI meta. No, sorry, the UZI meta.
It was
the UZI years. He was able to. Yeah,
every meta is UZI meta.
But he was able to play. I mean, yeah, it's true. He was able to play every single time, playing mid into bot. So I don't see why he can't play mid into top. I think his experience also, he's going to be doing a bit of coaching on the side for Ben. If this is a playstyle that worked for all of last year, I don't see any reason why they can't adapt to this year. And definitely, you can bet that with Wei and Ming in the mid game, they're going to be able, that they're going to have some ways to get back into the game, even if they don't execute perfectly in the early game. But I take Kelsey's point. That's something that Ben still has to prove. But I see them playing very similar to how they played last year. Maybe even if Xiaohu has to be the one calling Bin's wave.
All right, let's get into our tier list. We have all of our tier lists. We're only doing the top 8 here because there's so many teams in LPL, and we want to keep it on the teams that we will most likely be seeing in playoffs and that could make a run to win the whole thing. And the first team that we all have unanimously is EDG. I feel like there's not much to talk about here. Obviously, they won Summer Split, they won Worlds, and they didn't change their roster, where a lot of teams in LPL, pretty much every other team in LPL on this list has changed their roster. So I feel like there's not too much to say. If any of you want to chime in and talk about why we have EDG, I'm welcome to it. If not, we could just go to number 2.
I mean, it's all that I'll say about EDG is there was only one question on EDG, right? Which was, how is JJ going to perform under pressure? And, he's now played in the World Championship final and out jungled Canyon. I don't think there's any weaknesses left in this team. And yeah, it's going to take something very special for somebody to unseat them in
Perfect. Let's get into number 2, where this is where the spiciness starts. Okay, 2 and 3 for Peter, and 2 for Kelsey. Okay, so we all have different opinions. I have TES, Peter has LNG, and Kelsey has BLG. So, Peter, you have to tell us about LNG. Like, how did you have the confidence to put DunB second? Like, are you not afraid of all the backlash? We all saw what happened at Worlds when FPX went out. Like, all of us received so much hate on Twitter. Are you just immune to it? Do you just not care? Like, how do you have the balls to put LNG second, especially after Demacia cut?
I mean, look, this second is based on I1D playing. Like, I just pray that I1D will play. And what I would say about here is that Doinby hasn't fallen off a cliff. I think Doinby was fine at Worlds. He did as well as he possibly could with,
That's a controversial
let's say,
take.
mixed performances from... I mean, he with mixed performances from his jungle, right? That's what I would say about this. But I think that this team has upgraded mid. They still have the core pieces that made this team so scary from last split. And they have a very strong top laner to play into. They have a very aggressive mid jungle pairing that they can go and play for jungle. They have they have Poppy there to give them the secrets from RNG. And I think this team has so much talent across the board. Maybe you could argue Light is the one slight question mark, but he's a very strong weak side AD carry. And sure sometimes I1D and Light got attacked a bit in the early 2v2, but I think that the only teams that can really punish them in that 2v2 are BLG and EDG this year, and I think that the other four players will dominate. And I think that they're one of the teams that can beat EDG, because I think to beat EDG you can't be an all-round team. You have to be really specialized in one area, and I think the Doinby, Tarza and Ale trio I can definitely fight and compete. So I have a lot of strength with this team. I would say my top two, I would say that I have a top two, then a gap to third, then a gap 4-5, and then 6-7-8. So I think they're right up there with EDG. It's not even like a slight number two.
Hey, Kelsey, you have BLG. I assume that this is predicated on UZI actually playing. How do you feel about the other parts of this team? Are you just a super UZI fangirl, or are you just saying that the rest of the team is actually good enough to?
And it's funny that I feel like I started out my relationship with the LPL as a so-called UZI hater. So it's funny that I am now an UZI fangirl, in fact. But I do think that this is he is just one of those players that changes the game. I think that they're very rare, but they exist. And so for me, it's like starting off even without UZI playing. I feel like I don't see this team as just insane, but I think this team is a team that functions together, right? The team that kind of makes sense in construction. I think they originally wanted a super team, but what they're going to get out of it might be a bit better, right? Like having Breathe, who is someone who I don't think has the best laning, but does really well to create space in like front to back fights. I think that there might be some spiciness and contention in terms of like the personalities, but overall, in terms of just how all of the pieces play in the game, I feel like this is just a really, really strong, like well-constructed team. And I would see this team just like doing well, especially in a meta where I feel like right now AD carries are really, really strong. So I think if that meta persists through the spring, then we're going to see like BLG potentially contest for the championship.
Do you have any issues with potentially Fofo and the way that he likes to play with UZI? Because that's kind of where I run into on this team, where I just feel like they're both pretty heavy resource players. And when I think about Fofo, he doesn't really leave lane as much as some other mid laners that we see. So do you think that this will be an issue for them?
I don't know if it'll be in game as much of an issue, because I think having like two lanes that play really well together, and as long as you're not having like the enemy mid go and dive bot, then you can have that kind of setup that plays from mid to bot pretty effectively. But I do think that that's where you could have like both Fofo and UZI are let's put it diplomatically and say very strong personalities. So that's where I see this team like being explosive one way or the other.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and defend my TS prediction here. So I am thinking that Jackie Love is due to return to form at some point. That's at least how I feel. I just have this feeling that I think that he's actually like, it's not that hard for him to be a top tier AD carry again. It's just for him to just not throw the game when he's super far ahead. Like, he still generally has pretty decent laning. I think that the 2v2 changes, I guess not 2v2 changes, the TB changes, which is going to change the 2v2, will end up benefiting TES a lot. So I personally just think that this team is pretty well constructed. I know that you guys disagree, but I like the idea of having like two strong laners with the weak side top laner. It's like very standard. Probably not good enough to beat EDG, but I think at their peak, I think they're good enough to beat all the other teams. So that is
how do you Before you move on, Dom, how do you feel about the jungle situation?
I mean, I just feel like Tien. So this is my biggest issue with Tien, right? Like, he normally disappoints you right at the end. Like in spring and summer within LPL, he was actually pretty good for most of it until like finals, and then he just got absolutely like destroyed for finals. So I think that he can do that again within LPL. Like, he's been able to be a top jungler or like a top 4 jungler within LPL. He just doesn't get it done when it matters. So I mean, I think it's a solid second. You know, I think they could win a semifinals. You could be like, hey, of course Tien won't choke again, and then he'll just choke again. But that's why I have him second. I believe in their ability to actually get to the finals here. Okay, so for our third pick, I have RNG. Peter has RNG. Let's see Kelsey's third pick, which is LNG. Okay, so we both are RNG lovers. Kelsey, what do you think about RNG here? Do you think that RNG is just like, do you think that they're going to be a close like a competition to LNG, or you have them kind of like in the next tier of teams?
I think it's just RNG is that team where if as soon as you believe in them, they start to sag a little bit. But when you know that when everyone is flaming them and saying their roster is like bottom of the barrel is when they pop off, right? That has happened like 2017. People are like, Kelsey, stop hyping RNG. They have no money. That's why they have this roster, you know? And it's the same thing happened this year. So I don't know. Maybe it's just like almost stigma or superstition, but I do feel like they're going to struggle with their identity actually more. But I don't know. Listening to some of the logic, I think theoretically they should have a higher ceiling than they did because they were definitely figured out. But I think for me, I debated a lot between LNG and RNG because I feel like they'll both have similar problems to an extent because Doing B, I feel like people know how to play against a Doing B team now. Like Doing B style has been like pretty similar on every single team that he's been on. So for me, that's why I struggled to put like LNG higher. And he is always such a loud voice on the teams that he's on. I also don't necessarily see him having like insane synergy with Tarzan, who will always favor like more of the power farming style. So I think that that's kind of probably in retrospect, I might say RNG will be a bit higher long term. But I think that LNG will start off a bit stronger than RNG.
Oh. So pretty much I can sum it up by saying Jiahu was the problem and Cryan was the RNG.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah. I mean that's the solution. For me, I would just say RNG. I can't put any team that has Wei and Ming like below third. I mean, like I mean, those two, the way that they play the mid game. I mean, this team is just beautiful to watch. And the only thing I would add for RNG is the RNG BLG grudge match is going to be incredibly spicy because if I'm not mistaken, UZI didn't leave RNG under the best of situations, best of circumstances. So that's going to be a real spicy one to see in the calendar when they've announced the schedule. So I'm really.
How sad will you be if that match happens and they end up starting Doggo both games?
Holy moly! That would be spicy in itself. I think that to start Doggo against RNG twice would be spicy enough that it would still be worth it. I don't think there's a losing situation.
Okay. All right, that's fair enough. I'll be looking forward to it. So number 4, we can jump into all of our number 4s. This is where I have my BLG. Peter has TES and Kelsey has RNG. Okay, so we talked about the RNG point for Kelsey. Peter, you actually believe a little bit in TES. I'm surprised that you don't have BLG top 4. I mean, this is a super team, right? Like, so essentially, I mean, I guess we can't necessarily say this is not going to Worlds, right? Because we did this under the assumption that this is spring split. But do you think that BLG will just not end up being a Worlds caliber team with that level of a roster?
Well, it's interesting because I think all of us have the same top 5, right? I would be shocked if we didn't have the same top 5. But I would say that I have BLG, I think, lower than you because I'm not convinced that Fofo and UZI can play on the same team. And all different top 5? Okay, I thought it was the same top 5 teams, but just in different orders. But what I would say is that when I will believe it when I see it. When I see Fofo and UZI play together, I think that this, if they had a different mid laner, I would have this team maybe second or third. But I don't believe that Fofo has shown enough that he can go to. I think he's a very good player, and he's very good if you play for him. But BLG are not going to be able to do that with UZI in the team. And I think that if you're going to go all in on Fofo, then there's questions over whether that's enough to take you to victory in LPL. It worked in LMS, PCS, but I'll believe it when I see it. And that's why they're outside my top 5.
Let's drop our 5th picks in here so we can talk about, because I think that this will be essentially the like top tier like echelon here. Like all of these teams will be competing for the title, and I think there's a little bit of a drop off from the top 5. So I guess here, people are going to be surprised because I was a huge DNB supporter for a while, and LNG I have as 5th. I just feel like in general, this team might not have the best like function together. When I think about how FPX played, I feel like FPX actually had some people that were underrated. I think LWX in general is really underrated by the community, specifically in lane. I thought that his laning was actually pretty decent. I mean, he would sometimes run it down and just die, but I thought that actually helped like DNB have the ability to play more of his style. And I don't know if Light's going to be that same type of AD carry that is actually able to like put pressure on the map and allow DNB to actually fully play the way that he wants to. So LNG, I'm really sold on their top side. I'm not sold on their top side interaction with bot lane. And when I compare like Light to the other AD carries, I think the only AD carry that he can compete with in the top 5 would be Jackie Love, assuming that Jackie Love has like, some of his Jackie Love games where he just completely runs it down. Outside of that, I feel like his level is just lower than Viper, UZI, Gala. So to me, I'm a little bit worried about the interactions with topside and bot lane. So that's why I have LNG 5th here. Peter, you have BLG 5th. We talked about that already. And Kelsey with TES at 5th. I think that's a little bit interesting. I guess you're just really not sold on the whole Jackie Love Zoom dynamic.
And it's very possible that this team just won't have a juggler, right? Like to
I
put
guess
it
that's true.
As disrespectfully as possible. So I think that's kind of where I have trouble placing them super high. I think RG and TS are both teams that are super fun and exciting to watch. They were like my favorite teams to watch, even when TS was trolling. They carry on the IG system of, we're just going to put pressure in all 3 lanes. We're going to hedge, as Peter likes to say, and just perma play all 3 lanes. And then, like, if they gank one lane, we'll just make an even stronger play on the opposite side, right? So they have that spirit. So that's always fun to watch. But I can't say that they're going to go to Worlds. It's not enough of a plan to go all the way to Worlds.
I mean, I guess
I like Kelsey.
Go for it.
No, I like Kelsey that you still have them 5th, even though you don't think they're going to have a jungler. So even just the other 4 players on top are good enough to put them 5th in the league.
Pretty much, yeah. Even Droa, I think, like has good enough mechanical prowess that it makes their bot lane laning like really strong. He just loves to play the Xiaopeng and just like take every fight. Every fight is a good fight if you're Droa, which that's like the world that I want to live in as a spectator, but not necessarily as someone who's rooting for LPL teams during Worlds time, So that's what it is.
So now that we have our top 5, I guess there's something that came to mind, which is for all these teams, which team is it most acceptable for them to not go to Worlds here? Because I'm pretty sure all these teams like have the expectations to go to Worlds. So out of all these teams, which team is it most okay for them not to go to Worlds? Because I feel like this is going to be like, there's going to be some angry fans for one of these teams regardless. I don't know. I don't even have an answer to this question, but I thought about it during it, so like I wanted to ask it. Maybe we just don't have a response. Kelsey, do you have any idea here?
I mean, I think it's just not acceptable to not go to Worlds, and unfortunately, there's going to be a team that's going to be in a really bad spot because there's a big name that you can call out on all 5 of these rosters. That it's like if they don't make it to Worlds, then that guy's gonna like throw a fit, end up on a different team next year, and try it again in the different experiment, right? Like that's just gonna happen. So there's no universe where TS doesn't go to Worlds and it's acceptable. There's no universe where RNG doesn't go to Worlds and it's acceptable, right? It's just It just sucks. That's the way it is.
I have my I don't, this is going to be pretty controversial, but I think BLG, it's actually most acceptable for them to not go, just because of like their organization compared to the other ones. Obviously, it's super hard to be like, UZI returned and he didn't make it to Worlds. Like, that's going to be considered acceptable. But out of the other situations, I just feel like their like super team experiment, if they didn't go, feels like a lot of times these super teams don't work out. So to me, I think that's the most acceptable. Peter, what do you think?
No, I completely agree with you. I was thinking about it here. I fear for Fofo's career if BLG do not go to Worlds after what happened with Rare Atom this year. He's not the most popular person on the message boards in China right now. And if he's the one who stops UZI going to Worlds, it's going
PCS,
to be really, really rough.
He's going back to PCS, going the way of Maple for a year, and then he could come back like in a year on like a 14th place team or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that's the reality, sadly. But just for purely for the drama, seeing a team like V5 or FX or some of the other teams we're going to talk about later come in and keep two of these teams out of Worlds would be even more fun. So LPL is definitely worth watching this coming.
So Peter just wants to watch the world burn. Okay, got it.
Perfect. I mean, if the world was Fofo, I guess that's it. So. All right, number 6 for all of us. I think that we all are going to have the same team here, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, it's FPX, and FPX. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're definitely a team that is generally going to be underrated just because they dropped off. Like, I mean, they don't have Doinb anymore, and I think a lot of people were expecting this team to be bad. I feel like this team will be okay. I just think that they're never going to be able to touch the top 5 unless you just have Xiaolahu go beast mode. Is there any other hope on this team? Is it just Xiaolahu or bust, or do you think that this team actually can contend in any other facets with the top 5?
I mean, I think that this is one of the few teams in the league that can beat EDG in a best of 5. Wow. I think that I don't think they're better than EDG, but remember what I was saying. You can't play standard and beat EDG. You have to have like huge amounts of specialization, and Xiaolahu is one of those players that can maybe snatch a series. So I don't see FPX going to Worlds, but the upside is there. And like I was saying earlier when we were discussing we were discussing the remake of the FPX team, just ban Tien's Viego and you win the Master Cup. It's that simple. Don't give it to him. Don't let him go 3-0 on the one champion. He even says in his post game interview he's really comfortable on. So I thought that they looked good into Master Cup. I think that they're only going to improve with Cleared, and if the Cleared experiment doesn't work, then they've got good backups, solid playoff team, potential banana skin. Nobody will want to play this team in the best of 5. None of the top 5. So we'll see. Did
you say banana skin instead of banana peel? That must be some UK talk right there.
Oh yeah, it's a UK thing. It's a UK thing. Okay, banana for our North American audience. Banana peel,
Banana skin. Okay, all right. Well,
banana skin. Blue shell. We'll do it.
Yeah. Blue shell for sure. Kelsey, I want to hear a little bit about how you think LWX is going to do, because I felt like he was the most impressive member in Demacia Cup. I mean, he looked pretty unleashed there. Do you think that this guy is like going to kind of like elevate his level of play, being in this new position where it feels like the team's kind of built around him?
So I think you have to play around LWX, but that's to make him work. And the problem is that he'll throw like an entire game too often, in my opinion, for that to be really effective, right? And I think that there are a lot of players like that who like aspire to be those types of players because LPL has functioned off of those types of players so often. But I think for me, the way that this team ends up contending for top 5 is actually if Gory was jet lagged during Demacia Cup, or if he was not liking the food and ends up just popping off during the LPL season. Like, I feel like that's what is going to up their standings, and that's where they're going to get their oomph to go to the next level. Because for me, it was like Gory was probably the most disappointing. And LWX definitely performed like at his peak, and I just don't think that that's sustainable is the problem. So that's where I am.
Okay, let's drop our 7th picks in here, which I think I was like pretty surprised earlier at this, which is that V5 is a team that we all had 7th, where like in my mind, I felt pretty insecure about this pick personally. I was like, I don't even know if I should be putting them 7th. I don't know if I should be putting them 10th. Like, I'm pretty unsure about the level this team is going to play. Do you guys just have that much faith in Rookie? I mean, I felt like last year he wasn't playing the best. When I look at like the other players, like I don't think Cars had the best season either. So you have like a bunch of players coming off probably like some of their worst seasons in recent memory. PP God also, I think took a step back in 2021 from where he was in 2020. So how did you guys feel about placing V5 here? Was this something that you were confident in, or was it, the same type of thing where you could see this going poorly pretty easily? Peter, you can go first.
Yeah, for me, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all super, super high variance, all have potential upside. I can see teams as low as like 11th or 12th on my tier list going to Worlds this year. Like, if all the stars align. But for me, I just saw V5 as the one. I don't think that these guys are like a consistent 7. They could be, their range is like 3rd to 12, to be honest. But the upside, I see the highest on this team versus the other teams. I think Carson still got it. I think Rookie had a rough year, but I mean, some of the top lane plays that I saw from IGE last year were not the greatest. And Rookie was still a mid-tier mid laner in the league, even at his worst. I mean, I don't think he's ever dropped out of the top like 8 mid laners in the league. And his peak is much higher. The only question I have on this team is Photek, but I can see, I think they're definitely going to have strong mid jungle. I think Rich was. I mean, he was a good team fighter. I mean, he was good at team fighting in last split. His laning phase was very Bwippo-esque, very high variance. But the pieces are there for a team to perform very well. But by no means am I like 100% set that they're 7th. I think they'll come anywhere between 3rd and 12th.
I'm not surprised that Rich was actually able to play team fights. It's because he's a HOTS player, and that's all you actually do in that game, and there is no lane phase. So I feel like this guy. I mean, I could just state my biases up front. I'm a Rich hater. I don't think he's very good. I think his laning isn't high variance. I think it's just like on the bad side. Like I can't see him winning lane against anyone above him right now. Like maybe he could win lane against the Shy if the Shy just ints, because when the Shy ints he loses to everyone. But I'm really not sold on Rich. So I'm surprised. I mean, you sounded a little bit more confident than I am. Kelsey, how confident are you on V5?
And I think that Rookie's demise is greatly exaggerated. I still had him in top 5 of mids the entire season. I don't think that LPL is a region where having a good mid laner matters that much, because it is just support difference. But I felt like he just played really, really well consistently, and his laning was like always something that I liked watching, for example. So I am a big Rookie fan, and for me it was like, okay, I'm looking at the teams that I put below 7th, and they don't have Rookie on it, so I'll just put Victor on 7th. That's kind of how I came to my conclusion. Yeah, I'm
trying to think of like all the mid laners in LPL last year and where I would have had him, but I definitely wouldn't have had him top 5. I mean, by the end, like you have to have Fofo over him last year. You have to have Doinby over him last year, Scout over him last year, for sure. And I guess like then you kind of get into like this territory of mid laners that all aren't like super insane. Knight, obviously, you have to have above him as well. So that would be 4. So you have pretty much those 4 above him, and then he's just at 5th. Like no one else could compete. Like I would say for me, I would say like Shanks was probably better than him. Like I thought last year, which I don't have the highest opinion of Shanks, but I thought last split he actually played pretty well, especially in playoffs.
I'm one of the biggest Shanks defenders, but I still had Rookie over him the entire time. So, I kind of disagree on that. But I like Rookie never left my top 5 just because there was always stuff that he was doing that other people weren't. And I don't know. IG was a disaster of a team. I'm not going to say dumpster fire because it's overused, but it was just, it was terrible. It's like it didn't function at all. But I do still think like you saw Rookie have like those really, really high moments, and like for me, he was still a really great player to watch, and I think that he'll be the difference between like V5 being in playoffs or not, right? That's kind of how I see it, but I don't think this team has like the upside to go to Worlds. Rich, I'm not a big fan of. I think PP God I'm not the biggest PP God fan. Don't tell the Victory 5 supporters about that, but I think he has like I don't know. He has his moments for sure. But for me, it's like down to rookie, and then either Karsa or I always kind of want Xiaolong Bao to be that guy that pops off. So I think mid jungle can carry this team really, really far, and that's pretty much the hope that I have for them.
Yeah, I mean,
like
the more I think about it, I don't think that there's somebody who's definitely better than Rookie outside of the four that we mentioned above him. I just think that as somebody who's like watched Rookie for a while, the fact that he was no longer perfect and he would have those int moments was like almost so jarring that it makes you want to like think that he was worse than he was, because it was like, who is this guy compared to like who Rookie was? Because Rookie was just like the best for a while. So when you saw him suddenly have these games where he would just be the reason that they would lose, or like he would be in the position where you'd normally see him carry 100% of the time, and suddenly he's throwing those types of games, it's really hard for like you to take that in, or at least for me, it was really hard for me to take that in and not like overreact to like his level of play. So I think that might be more of why I rated him so low last split. Peter, what do you think about? I know you wanted to respond to what Kelsey said.
Yeah, I am the biggest Shanks hater in the world. So I'm sorry, Shanks. I would put Cream in the list of people that I thought were better than Rookie last split.
Oh, Angel! I would have had
Meta's
Angel
gonna be really,
over
really
him
well.
for sure. Angel, that's who just popped out. To me.
I would never have Angel above Rookie. I swear, this guy, like, I don't know what he's doing in his laning phase. Like, I don't think he thinks about lane. I don't think he does. And then sometimes his team fights are just like super coin flip. So I'm actually one of the biggest Angel haters. So there you go.
I'm an Angel lover. So. I'm an Angel supporter. I think that he's like one of the few mid laners in LPL that like actually is willing to, you know, play, I guess, like the boring picks. Like, I really like the Malzahar when he pulls it out. Like, that's something that to me is like, oh, that's a great pick. Like, that's one that can like win you a game in the right spot. So yeah, I'm an Angel supporter, so I guess we disagree there. Peter, you want to say something?
I noticed you both dodged Photic. What's your opinion
I have no
on him?
opinion because I don't really watch like LDL and know about him. I don't think that like he will be. I mean, I just can't see an LDL mid like 80 carry coming in and being that much better than the 80 carries that are already so stacked above him. So I even feel like even if he's a beast, the team could still just be a 7th place team.
I've you've also seen him play in LPL if you've watched him, and for me it's like I didn't have as much time to watch LDL this season as I would in past seasons, but like unless he's just so much better than he was the last year when he was in LPL and the year before, I don't see him being like the difference maker, right? He was okay. He didn't really push his limits very much. He was actually he was like not your typical LPL 80 carry, and he played kind of scared. So yeah, I'm not on the Photic train. So
yeah, well, we'll have to see.
All right, let's get our final teams in here for top 8. This was tough for me to do.
This was tough. This was the top 7. I felt were pretty east, but 8th was hard. So.
I mean, look, I'll just go and defend it right away. Like, if the Shy plays anything like he's played in the last like year and a half, 2 years, whatever, like this team was going to be nowhere close to 8th. Like, there's no chance they're getting 8th. But if the Shy plays like reasonably, I think that this team, I mean, it's still Suning, right? It's like 2020 Suning that made it to World Finals, except they have the Shy instead of Bin, which is a big change. But I think if the Shy plays decently and he kind of like maybe he just needed an environment change, he's playing with new players, maybe they can get into the spot. But it's all predicated on the fact that the Shy like will actually play like the Shy and not like somebody who doesn't even want to be playing professional league. So there I am.
How happy does Sword Art look to be back? Did you you co-streamed a lot of Demacia Cup? He looked super happy. Like, it was so nice seeing him so happy again.
Yeah, that's just like not being on.
So yeah,
TSM.
I can definitely see it.
That'll just do that to you instantly. But I mean, I feel like I was really unfair to Sword Art because I didn't understand. Like, I was like, oh man, this guy is like not performing that well in LCS, and he's like super overpaid. Like, what is this move? And I think that what I didn't understand is he's actually somebody I should have been praising the entire time, because he is like one of the best TSM haters. Like, he did it from the inside out. He hustled them for $5 million in one split, didn't even make Worlds, and then dipped. Like, this guy actually smurfed so hard. So, I mean, that's another reason why we got Weibo top 8 for me. Like, thank God Sword Art is back. Also, like, on a real note, I think that he'll play pretty well with Huan Fong. I felt like they always complemented each other well in lane. So I think that it will definitely be a big... It'll be a big reunion that I think will actually help the team, because On was just never that good, in my opinion.
Yep.
No, I agree. I agree.
Okay. I think I'm one of the biggest Sword Art defenders, I will say, because I feel like him and PoE should never, ever, ever, ever even like breathe the same air again. Like, they shouldn't. They play too differently. Like, Sword Art looks like such an inter because he'll take like lower probability plays, and PoE will be like, yeah, this is not an 80% sure thing. I'm sorry, you're on your own, dude. That's pretty much how that functioned. So
I always described him as like, he's the Chinese version of Hillsong, where if you put Hillsong on like the wrong team, then he is gonna completely int, and you're just gonna be getting like the Hillsong that gets flamed by everyone and their mothers. But if you put Hillsong on teams with players that actually want to fight, and like, they're gonna jump at a lot of these opportunities that the player's gonna find. So I think Sword Art will actually play a lot better in LPL and with Weibo again than he did with TSM. So let's move on to Peter's pick, Rare Adam. I'm actually surprised you had Rare Adam here, because I didn't have them like anywhere near this spot.
So let's take the TSM tangent, because there was a lot of rumors this offseason that TSM were recruiting from LDL. So I have actually studied a ton of LDL, specifically mid lane, and only mid lane. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert on LDL by any circumstance, but I have been watching. I've watched a lot of LDL around mid lane, and I felt that Strive was the second best mid laner in LDL.
Okay.
I thought that Wang Xiao was the best. We'll maybe talk about him in the honorable mentions. But Strive, I honestly thought that Strive was one of those people that might be going to TSM. So I thought that this guy was incredibly talented, very diverse champion pool, and I think that Junjia is a player that when I saw him in Solo Queue Worlds was really good, and I think that when he's been given his shot, he's always performed. So I see this team as being like a really, really fun mid-jungle team to watch. You've got Ibo there, who is, I mean, he's high variance, but when he's on, and his lows are not as low as the Shy. But I definitely think that this is a really, really fun mid-jungle AD carry team to watch. And if Strive can carry over his form from LDL, I think that this team can be really, really exciting. Obviously, I think it's high variance. I think Weibo are a team that you could put 8th. I think World Elite are. I think OMG are. I think IG are. I have Rare Atom there because I have faith in 3 of their players, which is more faith than I had for any other team, and that's why they're there for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see how it goes. But Strive is the one to watch out for. I think that this guy could be really, really good. Next play.
Kelsey, do you have any opinions on Rare Adam before we go into your 8th pick?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have nice things to say about Rare Adam, so I think we're gonna leave it at that.
Okay, nice. Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about OMG, because I mean, this team, it was just the cream show completely last season. Do you think that this team is actually like improved that much? Because for me, I kind of see them the same way I did last year, and I felt like even with Cream popping off, it was like hard for them to exist in playoffs. They look like the like for sure 10th best team. So what makes you think that they're going to actually be jumping up in the standings? Because I kind of view them the same way I viewed them last split.
So I didn't watch as much LDL as like I usually do to prepare for new seasons, but I did watch Shanji, and he's someone that I did watch top laners. Basically, I watch top laners probably more than other roles. And Shanji is someone I'm super excited about. I think if you have like 2 strong solo laners, even though they're really green, then you have a lot of potential. I still feel like Abel Like this guy, his legacy was he literally got called out by Faker for scripting, you know? So like this, you always kind of want Abel to pop off. So that might be more of a wishful thinking than anything. And I think Cold like looked pretty strong, like as a veteran player in Demacia Cup. So that kind of influenced where I was going. And I just think that there are a lot of really, really solid pieces. And I don't necessarily think that this is a team that will start off insanely good, but they're a team that can ramp up over the course of the season. And I feel like we've had OMG has consistently been like an okay development team, right? Since they got rid of their star-studded roster, they've sort of been an okay development team. You have like Breathe coming from them. You have a couple pieces here and there that come up from OMG. So I think that this could be their year where they're kind of like towing the playoffs line again. So
okay. So to the last thing that we'll talk about here, I know Peter wanted to talk about IG, and that'll be our honorable mention, which will be, IG, the 9th place team that Peter had, even though we're only doing top 8. So Peter, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about them, so you can start us off here.
So I mentioned Wang Xiao. I think IG. So the thing you need to know about IG is that they're owned by one of the richest people in China. They're not a team that are shy to invest in resources. They have this year picked up 4 of their people from IG Young. IG Young is probably up there with Young Miracle, the team, the best development team in LDL. They've brought up Neddy. They brought Shun. They brought Xiao Yueji, and they brought Lucas, all from IG Young. They've all promoted them. The one exception being mid lane. And I've been trying to work out why this is for next off-season. And to me, this looks like a rebuilding year. And it's interesting that Wang Xiao is on Top Esports. On their challenger team, and one of Knight or them or him is going to. He's not able to play this season because he's 16, and the rules in China have changed about when you're allowed to play, when you're allowed to sign professional contracts. But watch out for how this team develops. Watch out for who they play around, and watch them at the end of the season make a play for either Knight or Wang Xiao. And I that's my big thing to look out for IG. I think IG have a ceiling that is potentially very high. They don't have the veteran names, but this is a rebuilding year, and when IG make a move, it affects the rest of the LPL. So this is the big thing I want. This is my honorable mention. Obviously, Weibo as well, but as number 10. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about IG.
Okay. I mean, I don't have too much to add to that. I don't really know too much about like the behind the scenes like plays that they would be making as an organization. It's just that when I look at this team, I even feel like 9th is too high because last split they were like 13th, and I mean I don't know if they got better. I mean maybe they got better top side. Maybe their top lane got better. I think mid lane, I don't think it's easy to get better in mid lane, and then just in general, like Lucas is just Lucas. So for me, I just see them being like a 12th, like a 12th, 13th, like in that tier personally based on their roster. So I would love to see them make a move and have like some hype behind like a young mid lane star or something like that. I would love to see that, but for right now, I just can't see them being like very good. The split, like. I can't see them making playoffs. Kelsey, you have any take on IG?
I think what's interesting to think about IG is for so long they've been rookies team, right? But what's interesting to know about IG is that they've always been the team that's going to kind of create their own pipeline. Like that's sort of what they've been known for, is like promoting like super young players and then building up the roster. And then consistently this team will have the same identity no matter who starts for them, right? This has been true since like 2012, basically. They're very consistent in that regard. So them going for this kind of roster isn't surprising once they lose their stars. It's just about whether or not they can build the magic for the 3rd time, right? And that'll be. It took them a really long time last time. We'll say that. Really long time.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we will. We'll see. Do you think that there's a possibility they get 9th? You think there's a possibility they make playoffs here, Kelsey?
No. I'm doing to be candid. But, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. So this has been the LPL First Look. Hope you guys enjoyed it. The first look at the 2022 spring split, and we'll see at the end of the split how accurate our tier list is, our top 8. But yeah, until next time, thank you guys for watching.